Hey, Brian Castle here. I'm the founder of Clarityflow, back with another Clarity Cast. Today, I'm talking to Sarah Gallant. Sarah is a speech and language coach working with professionals all over the world. It was really a fascinating interview. And, you know, it's what's so interesting to me is that Sarah is not uh, so pigeonholed on a specific language or a specific region to English. It's, you know, she's working with professionals who are already, you know, English speakers, but they just need to be more effective in communicating with their colleagues in meetings or presenting to entire rooms or entire audiences. What was also really fascinating is just the global scale and how all these companies are becoming so global. Um, you know, where somebody might need to communicate from India to team members in Chicago and Sydney and in Europe. And it's incredibly challenging to be a professional in this world, no matter where you're from. And what Sarah does with CommuniClear Global is really helps these individual professionals and their teams become more effective at communicating across the world. So really fascinating line of coaching, and it's been really cool to hear how Sarah has evolved her structure of what she offers with the introduction of asynchronous tools like Clarityflow, of course, and like other performance type coaching. You know, there is a performance aspect of someone practicing lines, practicing speech, and Sarah being able to coach and give feedback on that. So that's an interesting use case for asynchronous and working remotely. So yeah, we covered a lot of really interesting ground here. I think you'll really enjoy it. Here's my conversation with Sarah Gallant. Enjoy. All right, I'm here with Sarah Gallant. Sarah, great to connect with you again.
Great to see you again as well, Brian. Thanks. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I was just saying to you just before we started recording that I do get hear a lot from coaches and trainers in speech and language
Hmm.
and public speaking. I know these are like very different areas, but it seems like it's really like an interesting uh, niche, if
Hmm.
you will,
Hmm.
niche. I
Niche,
never know how to
niche.
say that.
Tomato, tomato. I don't
um, right.
know.
um, so I'm really excited to talk to you about that this whole area
Sure.
of coaching.
Sure.
Um, what I usually like to start off these conversations by instead of like what do you do?
Mhm.
How do you describe, you know, who your typical client is, or maybe a recent client or two? Like
Sure.
who is that person, and how do they kind of engage with you?
Yeah. Well, I typically people come to me, they are they're global professionals who are struggling with being understood in spoken English. So they come to me saying, I really have a need not only to, let's say, improve my speech, which I'll talk a little more about, or my English sentence structure, but also just to feel more confident speaking at work, in meetings,
Hmm.
etc. So just to, I work with people who are both located in the U.S. as well as in different countries. And at this point, I'm working, I would say like 99% of the people I work with are actually, like a lot of people online by video
Mm.
conference. So just to give you a sense of somebody who might come to me, I have one recently new client who came to me. She is an attorney. She's established. She's been working at her law firm for, let's say, 7 years. Her first language is Chinese, so she's from China. And
Hmm.
she is established, but she is getting feedback from her colleagues that it's sometimes difficult to understand what she's saying. And
Yeah, and I'd imagine in the legal world that's extremely
yeah,
important.
and in her
Be
case,
clear,
yeah, and
right?
in her case, she's actually in the courtroom. And then she also has
Mm.
like a leader role at a professional association, here in Chicago. So she came to me looking for what they call an accent reduction coach, which is a very kind of a thorny, how to label that aspect of what I do, accent reduction English pronunciation skills. But she said, I want to boost my confidence. I want to understand how I can improve. She's like, I go to YouTube videos. I have even enrolled in some like English pronunciation online classes, which are 100% online. But she said, it's not working. And so I want to get really, individualized feedback and guidance.
Yeah.
So,
I can imagine it's so much more than just learning the language or the correct way to say something. I would imagine, especially in the professional world, it's like, what's the most effective way to say something in a way that like this group of people will really get it,
right.
like, or
Right. And
or like maybe saying things in a way that technically the words might be correct, but the person doesn't really understand what you're trying to get at.
Well, and that's like one misconception, like even in this field of, I've been in the English language training industry for, field for 20, 25 years. And it was really only like 20 years ago. I mean, obviously people have always been teaching pronunciation, but the focus of what how you help learners has always been on individual sounds. And now obviously the sounds are important, but also like there are elements of the music of the language, like the rhythm, which is typically not addressed very in depth in school, so
Right.
it's really just about helping people to be understood. And if they're like in like in the case of this recent client, that attorney, in her case, she probably, I would imagine, needs help with, proving or guiding the listener's attention to a specific point. So knowing how to adjust your voice when it's not your native language is going to be a very useful, skill to kind of have.
So, I mean, I was kind of browsing your website
Yeah.
at CommuniClear Global,
Sure.
and we'll get it all linked up in the notes for this.
Sure.
But I was a little bit unclear about
Yeah.
like, okay, so are there particular languages? I mean, that example, the person was Chinese.
Sure.
Are you multilingual? Like, how do you work
No,
with
great,
folks?
excellent question. Thanks for asking. I am not, like, can speak Spanish. I know some Portuguese. I know some Italian. But the people who come to me typically are, interestingly, in the past, pre-COVID, was more very, very, let's say, proficient or extremely advanced speakers who are, and even sometimes native speakers, say from India. So they have, their first official language might be Hindi, English, and then a language from a province. So they're, I forgot your question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like how do you deal with like they're coming from all different parts of the world.
Right.
So it sounds to me like your clients they're already English speakers,
They're already English
but they just
speakers.
they need to be just more effective in the way that like their colleagues are speaking.
Right. Well, and yeah, and like I have like one client who is a company employee. I don't, he's in Chile. He's probably, let's say, an intermediate if you're like to give him a level. But his job involves managing global teams, global projects. He said, I don't feel like I have a comfortable enough of a command of the language. I don't have enough vocabulary. So, I've been actually using Clarityflow for everybody I'm working with right now. And with him in particular, I'm either helping him with a work project in terms of it being able to express his ideas, or or impromptu speaking. And so in terms of the people who I work with, I've worked with people of probably 16 different language backgrounds, maybe 18,
Oh, wow.
maybe 20 at this point. But their English is at a level where the communication is such that it's not, they know enough for me to work with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really
Super
about helping
interesting.
people kind of like advance their spoken English, whether it's like
Yeah.
language use or, increasingly have more people also coming to me to work with vocal projection. So, it's a very,
That was
yeah,
actually my next question
yeah.
is like what is typically the main like goal or aspiration for your clients? It sounds like it's probably a mix of things. So
It's,
like is it like communicating with their teams, with their colleagues? Is it like public speaking in
Yeah.
front of like large groups?
It's a
Like,
mix. I'm very,
mhm.
at this point, like when I started out, I started out teaching at a university here in Chicago, and the people I was working with were graduate students who were hired on. They're international graduate students who are in chemistry or engineering, and the departments wanted to hire them to be a TA, meaning to throw them in the classroom. Yet their spoken English was difficult to understand. So in
Mhm.
that, so from there, I was also working with you know, speakers who are physically located in India, and their jobs were to communicate with people here who are here in Chicago as well as in Australia. And there's a
Mm.
lot of tension just because of the accent interference. So,
Yeah.
you know, I would say it was more of a priority in terms of people saying, I want English pronunciation, accent reduction coaching. Now it's shifted more to like, I'm thrown into situations where I suddenly have to lead teams. I have to give presentations. And depending on any
Yeah.
given client, which I always find out during that first call, we kind of like orient the coaching to whatever they're needing to do for work. But it is primarily for
Yeah.
professional purposes. Yeah.
It's starting to occur to me now, like
Yeah.
these large global companies,
Right.
it must be so difficult to communicate when you have teams in so many different parts of the world. Like you were
Yeah.
just describing, like somebody in India needs to
Right.
communicate with teams in Chicago
Correct.
and Australia. And I think about like I know people from these different areas, and it's like, yeah, they're all speaking English, but it's a very different English
It
across
is. And,
across
and
these,
like, and really, in all honesty, especially when you have non-natives communicating with non-natives because there are more non-natives than natives of English, speakers of
Hmm.
English, it's just about getting the message across, keeping the message delivery simple, and that's
Yep.
something else I also kind of work with depending on the coaching need, which is message delivery, so that you're focusing on the key idea to get out. But yeah, it's, I
Yeah.
think it's kind of, yeah, I've heard
And then even like within the United States, I mean, I'm from New York
yeah,
originally, and like there's a this,
no, it's,
we speak
yeah,
way different than like California and
yeah,
Texas and
yeah,
Chicago, and
yeah, yeah. And I love it
amazing.
because you learn about kind of the influences of culture that play
Hmm.
into people's experiences, depending on whether they're here, like you're saying, like in New York, or perhaps, they're still physically somewhere else. So, yeah,
Yep. So, tell me a bit more about like what a typical engagement looks like. And again, I was
yeah,
browsing your site, and I
sure.
see you do coaching. You also do like programs, group programs, and trainings. Like, how does
Hmm.
it all sort of fit together
Work
for you?
out. You mean kind of like, well, so, kind of like you mean like when somebody first comes to me and how do I kind of figure out what do I offer for
Yeah.
anyone?
Yep.
Yeah. So like during any, like when somebody comes to me, obviously I learn about what they're looking for. I always ask like, what are you not looking for in a coach, right? What are you looking
Hmm.
for? What's your key objective? Where do you want to get to in terms of short-term goals? And then typically I've been doing primarily one-on-one coaching for the past, I would say, since COVID.
Oh, okay.
Pre-COVID, I was working more with like either I had an office downtown, so I sometimes ran small group programs,
Hmm.
or I ran these kind of programs for these group of pharmaceutical employees in India for a number of years. It's something I created early on, and that went really well. This is kind of pre-Zoom days.
Huh.
So it's been primarily one-on-one, and now I'm kind of moving in a direction of wanting to provide group coaching, and that's getting probably beyond not working just with speech or accent, because that's also the people who need that typically come to me being very, very busy. They don't have time. They don't
Hmm.
feel either it might be about the exposure of getting the individualized feedback because it can be
Yeah.
very, nitty gritty specific. But I'm kind of moving a little more into, let's say, fluency coaching, trying to get that into a group coaching situation, and then also offering a more working on more passive income. So
Yeah.
I've created a lot of material since I started this. I've been in business now for 10 years, so I've created a lot of materials and probably have not done myself justice in terms of what I could offer, to actually get more revenue coming in. So
I mean, we were talking about this being like a niche, but it's such a huge global ocean of different needs in the areas of speech and communication,
Right.
So I definitely want to get into like how you're transitioning into like the group stuff and more passive, but like even more basically, so
how do I actually work? Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of curious about like, okay, so I know it's like mostly like professionals. Are you mostly working with like an individual person, or would like a company approach you and say
both.
like we want to bring you in for like our department or something like that?
It's been both. Individuals will typically, when it comes to like working with accent speech, it's really the individual, because it's a very in a company, maybe during a during an annual review and creating an action plan, they might get feedback you're difficult to understand, improve your ability to communicate in meetings, so it's never really directly addressed as speech, because it can then become, especially in this, these days, it becomes politicized. And that's something I've struggled with in the very, very beginning in terms of the marketing of it. Because it's like, well, I can't, you know what I mean? Like, accent reduction. Like, I mean, I love accents, so it's not, people have, it sets kind of a preconception. Like,
it's a fine line between like, this is like personal, professional.
Bingo.
We need to be effective at work.
Exactly.
We need to, but we're all individuals here, right? So
right. So a lot of I have had companies come to me work with an individual. I've had companies come to me saying, we have a group of employees, the scientific researchers like in India, the example I gave you, can you help? And I've created programs, and it's like been good. But I would say, nowadays, especially when COVID kind of happened, from contacts I have who are more in like kind of like in a larger relocation companies, I have heard like essentially the concern, like in the old days, it was like, oh, we can't really understand person X, but we're going to go and follow up with emails and kind of make sure we get things clarified. When COVID, with COVID, where everybody's like maxed out in terms of putting in long hour days in the corporate arena, the whole issue of speech was like, we don't care anymore. So it's, so people, I think it's kind of a tricky topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like the transition with COVID really made a pretty big impact on how you work and who you work with, right? So
really.
Like, what did that look like? Like what? So correct me if I'm wrong. Like, but pre-COVID, were you more local, regional, in person? And it became more global as you went remote on Zoom and after COVID, or?
Good question. I would say there was definitely more like pre-COVID. Part of growing the business was I would go to, say, a networking event, or like in the office space. It was like an office, kind of like a co-working space for entrepreneurs. So you there are opportunities to meet people, and that can lead to making connections. That's really, I felt like, okay, that kind of, it's like business by referral, past clients referring people, and then keeping new people. And I've always been bad at marketing. So I know this is my, like lot of people in my position. It's like, but yeah, so it now it's shifted also, like in how I'm doing things. Like my whole approach has shifted as well in terms of what I'm offering. So like coming to, with Clarityflow, so one of my, kind of Suzanne, somebody who knew your product, she and I were communicating about my website, and I'm like, and your zip message at the time, correct?
Right.
And I was like, this is an interesting tool, because that's how she communicated with me. And I was like, oh my gosh, let me look more into this. So, I think that, that this tool is actually kind of instrumental, I think, in all honesty, to my kind of going forward.
That's
You
awesome.
know,
Hey, just a quick break to tell you about Clarityflow. It's the software tool loved by coaches and their clients for communicating asynchronously in threaded conversations using video, audio, or text. My team and I designed Clarityflow for the modern day coach. It lets you give clients a single place to engage with you and all that you offer through your coaching business. Run coaching groups, cohorts, and communities using our Spaces feature. Create interactive courses using our Programs feature. Build your coaching library with templates and reusable content. And sell access to your coaching programs with subscriptions or one-time payments. Customize colors and connect your domain to give clients a fully branded experience. You can use Clarityflow on the web or our mobile apps for iPhone, iPad, or Android. And connect any other apps using our Zapier integration. Start with a free trial or request a personalized demo and consultation by going to clarityflow.com. That's awesome. Yeah, I want to hear more about that. So you and I spoke about this a few months back.
Sure.
How are you using, Clarityflow, but just asynchronous in general?
Yeah.
And from what I remember from our previous conversations, correct me if I'm wrong,
Sure.
but you do like direct coaching, but there's also like a performance aspect to it, right? Like
100%.
Like exercises in speech that you can do asynchronously. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So my clients, when I work with them, they have access to my online modules. And then when we, whether we're meeting live, you're asking about the asynchronous. With the asynchronous piece, I will, create a topic, and this is again based on whatever they're having to do for work. So if I have somebody who's having to prepare for a presentation, they have reviewed a specific module on a specific pronunciation topic, if we're kind of focusing on the speech. I will then say, okay, I want you to talk about slides. Maybe if we're working on slides over a period of time, record slides 1 through 3, and then I'll give you feedback on whatever the specific pronunciation topic is. So either they record directly on Clarityflow, or they may upload, if they're like doing something like a screen recording, and then they upload it. And then what I do is I take the transcript feature, which I love, and then I'm able to I'll listen to the recording. I'll say, okay, let's really focus on this specific aspect. That is the speech feature of the week, and anything before, I highlight the transcript and then I give them my feedback, by talking.
Yeah.
So it's
that's fantastic.
It's been great, and then I'll they'll say post a note saying, hey, the feedback's available, or they know it's going to be available because we've set up the rhythm for it.
They'll get the notification and everything.
Correct.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's been good.
It's just like any other performance coach, right? Like if you're improving your golf swing, they'll take a video and analyze the video, right?
Exactly. And part of the coaching, and there does also kind of gets into training, is there's ear training. So some of the people I work with, I can always tell who has more of a musical background and who doesn't. Because the people who have a musical background, they're, if they had the language for talking about whatever speech topic, they can catch it. So, that's always something I integrate into the beginning of any program, because, being able to listen to your own recording and evaluate it is an incredibly critical part of the process, So whether you're doing presentation coaching, audio, speech coaching, that ability to be able to hear yourself also helps you to catch it in other speakers, which helps to reinforce whatever it is. So
totally,
I've found it to be very, very efficient, that process.
Yeah.
So.
And I would also imagine, especially in your work, everyone's working remotely now, but you're really talking to people in China and Australia and India. The time zones with the asynchronous must make it a lot
wonderful,
easier.
because it's wonderful. In the old days, I worked a lot of people who had their own businesses in the beginning, was working all crazy hours. I got married after COVID. So now I'm okay, have a little more of a person. I have to keep it contained. So it's been really, really great for that too. Yeah.
Nice. And you mentioned you have modules. So you have like so these are like pre-recorded content or
Hmm.
like exercises that many clients use
Yeah.
repeatedly.
Yeah. It's kind of a combination of like short, like, like mini lectures, maybe anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, depending on what the topic is. Some of them are like 1 minute, again, it kind of depends. PDFs, which include warm ups. And then there are like daily practice pages. So for the people who do, really like I had one group they were located in Vietnam and they typically kind of break off their endings. They have a very difficult
Hmm.
time producing the consonant endings, not to get too technical.
Hmm.
And so I told them, we would meet and say, go through the materials through the mini lectures to at least have, so we have a common language when we meet. But in your case, also go through the daily practice pages, which I've created by text, through the platform.
Yeah.
So it's
This
very,
is
very specific and it's very technical what I do. And so the people I
yeah.
work with, lawyers, are typically very deep, dig deep, get analytical, they do
Hmm.
communicate. Engineers love structure, so I put everything in terms of the English sound system, and I just kind of have broken it up into kind of like chunks,
Hmm.
and every are like daily practice pages.
What I what I love about what you do here
Yeah,
with the pre-recorded material,
yeah,
and this was really instrumental for me and for when we were designing the shift into
hmm,
Clarityflow and these what we now call the library
yeah,
in Clarityflow.
yeah,
Um, One of the big learnings that I had from you and from many other coaches was this idea of like having a literally a library of content and modules that you can pick and choose and
yeah.
curate for each individual client.
Right,
And I think
right.
that's what's kind of unique about how coaches use what's typically like a course. A lot of
Hmm.
coaches sort of like resort to picking up like a
Well,
course software, but that's
sure.
you're not necessarily teaching like lesson one, lesson two, lesson three, lesson
Right. No,
four. It's like this
exactly.
client needs just these.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, and I actually need to explore the library function a little more because I've just started using. I'm like, oh my gosh, because you upgraded everything so fast, and I was in the middle of like so. It is a great feature, and a
It
lot of
feels
my
slow to us, but yeah, there's a lot. Actually, literally just today we launched like a whole new like training guide and videos
oh
on
great,
everything. So it's
great.
like
Well, I'll take a
we're
look at
like
it.
we ship these features and then we like circle back around a month later with actual like guides on how to use them.
Thank you. For people like me, thank you very much.
Right.
But I was gonna just say, like, like during any coaching, session, depending on kind of what's come up in the because I always start by saying, like, what do you want to focus on today? Do you want to do work related? Do you want to do not work related? What's going on in your world? And sometimes I'll get like, I am so stressed out. And so I'll pause and I'll pull a document, like a warm up, just that's used with the purpose of like reducing stress, like
Mm,
for, like kind of like warm ups for like, presentations and, kind of just getting them back in their bodies. And we kind of do stretching. So it
right.
goes from that to, they may come onto the call saying, I need a technique to help with a specific speech feature, or we'll figure it out together in the course of a session. Now that I have access to the public library, it's going to make it even easier because I've got a whole, folders of materials on this end. So
Hmm.
so
It's
the
fantastic.
spontaneity, I think, is what I love about Clarityflow. It's like, oh, this is gonna make it even better because the
Yeah.
spontaneity feature is so critical these days because everybody's overworked, and you want people to feel like they're in a good headspace to work on speech, even if they're exhausted or stressed
Yeah.
out. So yeah,
So yeah, let's get back into like some of the newer developments
yeah,
in how you structure your business and how you're changing up your offerings and everything.
sure,
Um, I guess going from like one to one engagements, which I'm sure are a continuous thing for
hmm,
you, right?
probably, yeah,
How
yeah,
how do you how do you start to make the transition to a group setting? And I would imagine like one of the
hmm,
challenges would be like everyone in a particular group or a cohort sort of needs to be in the same level or the same kind of challenges
sure.
to all learn together, or maybe not. I don't know.
Well, like actually, I'm I mean, I've done like a lot of, I mean, I have many years of teaching, working with groups of multilingual speakers, right? So
Hmm.
like that's more like kind of like in a university teaching, having groups work together and, everybody has perhaps a specific, like they need to improve something more than the person next to them. But there's so much, in that, when I was doing that, there's a lot of value that of kind of interacting with me, but also interacting with other speakers. And so at the group programs, I'm, intending on, we'll have like one live group session per week where we'll do a lot of, like live, like for fluency,
Hmm.
depending on the level, we'll do, they'll be contained to like 6 to 8 people. And there are various, things that we're going to do as a group in addition to dealing with strategy. And then I'm also going to offer kind of like a online community platform where they can interact with each other, and then I'll give them an assignment or give them a task and a buddy, kind of like an accountability buddy,
Hmm.
where they can also kind of like interact with people outside of the 1 hour that we spend. Does that
Yeah,
make
I
sense?
love
So
absolutely.
it's very organic, and
Yeah,
they all can learn from each other, right? So on my
that's the
job,
big value
yeah,
with group coaching, I think, is like of course it's a way to sort of like scale your expertise to helping
right,
more people simultaneously in a group,
sure.
but I really think that most students or clients, like the more than half of the value that they're getting is actually just being in a group and learning from
I
each other,
agree.
sharing notes,
No, I
uh,
agree. And I also think like sometimes like it kind of just the accountability piece of it. Like if it's, I mean, did teach English pronunciation skills programs and they liked it for that reason. They're like,
mhm.
this is great because they were still keeping contact with each other when we weren't meeting. That's something I would love to kind of like offer online, but I might go back to that.
Yeah.
Um, you know.
How are you structuring it? Like, are there, so you mentioned like small groups.
Mhm.
Is there like a enrollment period where you're doing these like throughout the year?
Good question, because I'm offering my first one in December. So like I'm just kind of
Okay.
keeping it small, kind of like as a kind of like a test period. So it's gonna be
Hmm.
kind of like a little more of a reduced pricing. It's on my website now. I need to work on marketing it a little more. And I'm letting past clients, people I've worked with. I've worked with a number. I have worked, and I'm currently working with one-on-one CEOs of larger companies. So
Hmm.
I'm about to kind of, announce literally this week, this is what I'm going to be running in December, and then it will continue into the new year. But it's just like a 3 week kind of trial period. So,
Great.
yeah, yeah. So, um, yes, I'm not sure if that answered your question,
No,
but
that's great.
yeah,
I think it's so cool to see so many different coaches starting to experiment with just being able to offer value in new ways other than just booking your calendar solid with
no, I'm yeah.
appointments.
In all honesty, that's one of my key goals too. Like
Yeah,
a
for
lot,
sure.
a lot of people talk about coaches. Like, okay, it's time to scale. It's time to get away from one-to-one, coaching because I like it, but it does consume a lot of time. So
Yep.
just and energy, personal energy. I would say I'm more of an introvert. So it's like,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Um, yeah, I mean, so like what, as we start to wrap up here,
yeah.
you talked about like the group stuff, getting into more passive income and then getting into like 2024. Um, what else are you sort of like looking ahead to in terms of like where you'd like to evolve CommuniClear Global and your work?
Well, one kind of vision I have is, I'm still pretty connected to people I've worked with who are kind of in my area of expertise here in Chicago. They're still at the university. And one idea and something I had from the very beginning, and then kind of has gone through various permutations over the years. But, having a small group of people who also, we have that kind of that language for helping people with clarity and hiring a few more people and
Mm,
to kind of take my place for giving the individualized feedback on the asynchronous program. So
I love
that's
that.
one
Yeah.
aspect of what I'm kind of like looking to do. you know.
It's such a big step, and you know, so
Yeah,
many not just coaches, but like
right,
any professionals really
right,
going from just you to, especially when it's you being the coach and the expert and the
right.
having the personal relationship, and bringing on other coaches to work
Hmm.
with you and offer that.
Yeah,
But you've already taken, I think, one of the key steps, which is having this brand of CommuniClear Global, right? Like it's
right.
not under
Which
your
sounds like a large
personal
company, I
name.
know.
Yeah. Yeah, of
Full
course.
transparency, I know it sounds
Yeah.
like a large company. So,
Yeah.
uh,
But you know, it's also where having like the library of modules, it's like this is the program, and other
bingo.
people who have these skills can deliver the program.
Exactly. So that's, that's something that's kind of clicking into place as I'm kind of getting back into kind of like learning more about all the upgrades he's made. It's like, ooh, okay, how could I do this? Thinking about trying to take that next leap forward.
I love it. Yeah, and our spaces feature as well is really good for forming groups and cohorts. Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to upgrade my I'm on the legacy plan, but I decided I'm gonna upgrade now.
Yeah, great.
Like an access
Again, we've
space.
got all new guides for that stuff.
Yeah, perfect.
Um, Sarah, you've been so
Yeah,
helpful as a customer, and also just as, you know, giving a lot of feedback about the product, and
sure.
again, you know, what you do, um, it, it follows a lot of the same patterns that we see across so many different coaches, especially in like
Hmm.
language and speaking, but like even
Hmm.
other, you know, we have a few coaches who are in like guitar teaching
Cool.
and singing coaches and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And there's a lot of similarities in like when it's like a performance based coaching. You know,
absolutely.
yeah, really
Absolutely.
interesting.
No, no, and I love it that the tool is so multi-dimensional. So it's like
Hmm.
text, video, audio. So
Yeah,
it kind of allows for that. Yeah.
very cool. Well, thanks for doing this, Sarah. It was great to
No.
connect again.
Okay, you too. Thanks so much.
All right.
All right.